Up next, Brandon Wainwright joins us. He's got an incredible story to tell us, Tyson's Gift, how an 8-pound canine became a man's greatest spiritual guide. We'll be talking with Brandon all about that in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Let me tell you about our guest, Brandon Wainwright, a former police officer. Brandon saw a lot during his 12 years on the force, but nothing so strange or the life-changing as the spiritual awakening he experienced when his dog, a Chihuahua named Tyson, passed away and then began communicating from the other side. Once a hard-nosed skeptic, Brandon found himself thrust into unfamiliar territory, to be sure, consulting with spiritual intuitives and pet communicators in an effort to uncover the truth about the afterlife, embarking upon an incredible journey that would shake his perception of reality, challenge his beliefs about what happens to us after we die. Brandon is an energy healer now at his practice, Tyson's Gift Healing Arts in Tallahassee, Florida. His book is Tyson's Gift, How an 8-Pound Canine Became a Man's Greatest Spiritual Guide. And Brandon, welcome to the program, and thank you for serving as a police officer, sir.
George, thanks so much for having me, and thank you for your service.
You know
I've been a fan of yours for a long time, so I know all about your Navy service.
This 9 years Navy for me, but I didn't see the tough streets like you did as a police officer.
Well, I think members of the armed services they have my respect. That's for sure. The sacrifice they make, them and their families.
Absolutely. I think what's important for everybody to get a full understanding of this incredible story you have is first to talk before Tyson passed on. Tell us a little bit more about you first, pre-Tyson.
Pre-Tyson, I was, as I said, I was a police officer. I was kind of your average Joe, an agnostic for sure. I had, in terms of spiritual pursuits, I had tried on quite a few different religions over the years and always had a longing for that sort of thing, for spiritual connection. But for me, the only way I knew to pursue it was through religion, and nothing ever really took for me. So I had become an agnostic. I was at peace with that. I believed that there was more out there, but I had come to the conclusion that I was never going to know what that was, and that was okay with me. But that was until Tyson came into my life.
What led you to become a police officer, Brandon?
I wanted to be a part of something where I was helping people and serving and being connected to a larger entity than myself. And I loved working with people. Prior to my service with the police force, I delivered bottled water for a number of years, and I just loved being out there, moving around outside and interacting with other humans, and I also delivered for FedEx and DHL. So it was kind of it was a similar environment, but I felt the longing to do something more important, more where I was providing more of a service to the community. And I'm pretty, I'm physically oriented. I like to exercise. I like to be a good example for people and that sort of thing. So it was kind of a natural fit for me.
And when did Tyson enter your life?
Tyson came into my life when I met my wife and I, who's now my wife. At the time, we were just getting engaged, and she got him from a friend who had moved into a place where she could only have one dog, and she had two dogs, Tyson being the newer of the two. So she had to make a choice and to find a new home for Tyson. My wife the lady had brought him to work a number of times for Bring Your Dog to Work Day, and so my wife had fallen in love with him. So Lucy, that was the lady, she knew that Misha, my wife, would be a good owner, a good mom for him, and so she asked her. And so next thing you know, he's coming into our lives, and initially at the time my wife and I were working through a bit of a rough patch. We were just coming out of it, and we were lucky. We got our rough times out of the way before we got married. And but when she got him initially, I was a little bit apprehensive about it because the last thing I wanted was, a little dog taking her attention away from me. But I never would have told her that because it would have made me look like an idiot. But that's how he came into our lives, and it wasn't a choice that I had made. But man, once he came in, I fell in love with him immediately.
Little Chihuahuas, they're cute, aren't they? But they bark.
But he wasn't terribly yappy, but he was 3/4 Chihuahua, quarter Dachshund. So he kind of had the perfect combination of, he's just the cutest dog you could ever imagine. Multicolored eyes and real soft fur and real cuddle bug.
Just a little guy. How old was he when you first got him, and then how old was he when he passed on?
He was just a little over a year when we got him, and he ended up passing when he was 14. So we had him for good 13 years, and it went by like a blink of an eye, as I'm sure you can imagine.
Now, during the course that you were owning him and having him as your family dog, did you change at all spiritually at that point? But nothing, I would assume.
At the time, I probably would have said no, because as far as my intellectual viewpoint on spirituality, that didn't shift so much. But when Tyson came into my life, I had, as a child, I had quite a few kind of traumatic experiences with animals, where they were taken away from me, and so I still loved dogs especially, but I kind of developed a thick skin around me when it came to animals because I associated that with loss subconsciously. And so when he came into my life and I became close to him, he really opened up my heart, because initially I should back up a little bit. Initially he was just an absolute pistol. With my wife, he was the perfect prince. He was just the sweetest dog. But when it came to me, he was like the first time I looked in at him in his little kennel, he started growling at me.
Really?
Oh yeah, and I couldn't even get close to him because he would nip at me, and it took quite about 2 months of just very consistent. Just trying to be close to him and giving him attention and giving him love. And the thing about that was that in order for me to get close to him, I had to dig into myself and bring out the softest, most vulnerable, loving part of myself to shower on him. And that was I guess I instinctively knew that was the only way I was going to win him over. And so it got me in touch with a part of my heart that had kind of closed up a little bit. At the time I was in my early 30s, and so anybody at that age has had enough experiences where they, if you're not careful, you can harden to different things, relationships, divorces.
Yeah.
My parents, it was a really awful divorce my parents went through when I was a teenager, and the other animals and things. So he forced me without me realizing it to dig deep and bring out the most loving, softest part of myself. And so I was connecting to a part of my spirit that was a little bit dormant, I guess is the best way you could describe it. And so I think I had become more spiritual without even realizing it while he was alive, but I never would have been able to articulate that to you at the time. So I'm coming back to your question. It sounds
like you both softened up at the same time.
Yeah, I would say so. And I think Tyson was, I know from different experiences that I've had since then that part of that was part of his role on this earth was to open hearts and mine in particular. And so I think he definitely healed a lot and dealt with some of his own issues. But, that role that he played as the tough guy, that hard egg, definitely opened up my heart. And so, yes, I think so. I think we both softened and grew through the process.
So you passed at 14. At about what age, Brandon, did he start buttering up to you?
He, like I said, about 2 months in from the time we got him.
Oh, okay. So really for almost the full 13, 14 years, he got close to you.
Yeah, we were very, very close throughout his life. It was just that, when you're used to, I was one of those people where dogs always took to me immediately. On my delivery routes, I always had dog friends all over the place, and so to have a dog that I immediately had fallen in love with, treat me like a leper for 2 months was unusual, to say the least. But yeah, and the thing was, because it was such I had to earn it so much, and it was like we had a depth of understanding that wouldn't normally be there, and so it made the relationship all the richer, I think.
What's amazing too is, I bet when you and your wife would go out, I bet you couldn't wait to get back home.
Oh, for sure. Well, most of the time he was with us. He was one of those dogs as long as we could take him, and as long as we weren't going someplace where they didn't allow him, or. Did
you ever have to hide him?
Yeah, actually we did. we did a few times, sure. But he was my constant companion. Anytime I was driving around running errands or whatever, as long as it wasn't hot outside to where I could, if I was going into a store or something like that, as long as it wasn't hot, I would take him and let him, and he was always there waiting for me when I got back. I'd hit the unlock button on the car, and he would pop up and look through the window. You could always count on it. But yeah, definitely. For example, when I was in the police academy, it was a live-in academy that was a couple hours from where we lived, and so I had to be gone during the week, and and I missed him every bit as much as I missed my wife and my daughter.
Sometimes maybe more, right?
So yeah, I mean, they definitely, there is a difference there. There's a certain innocence and vulnerability that a beloved dog or cat or parrot or whatever pet is your favorite that they have, and it's the love is so pure. It does create a certain attachment that your relationship. Well, I'm not saying that I loved him any more than my wife or my daughter.
Right. But it's a different kind of love.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and it is very much like you're longing to get home and snuggle up with him. So I definitely missed him a lot.
We're talking with Brandon Wainwright. His book is called Tyson's Gift. His websites are linked up at coasttocoastam.com. We're going to get into his book in a big way right after the half, and then we'll take calls with him in our second hour. And perhaps if you have a story about how a dog or an animal has affected your life, you can do that as well. So he goes until he's 14. Does he die of natural causes at that age, or does something happen to him, Brandon?
No, he died of natural causes. He died of a brain tumor. It was benign, but where it was on his brain, it was causing seizures.
Oh,
and so it over a period of time, we were able to alleviate the symptoms with medication for a period of time, but eventually the tumor got too big, and then the decision was obvious once that happened. But it was a pretty awful thing, but I would have rather that certainly than some accident or something like that.
That fateful day that he passed, what was it like for you?
It was like, I guess the way you would expect it to be. I was numb. It was one of those deals where I couldn't. It was surreal. Like he was such a big part of our family, such a big part of our hearts that I remember I came home, or actually, my wife ended up being in the room with him. I couldn't bear to be in the room when they gave him the injection, because I didn't want to see the life go out of his eyes. And so I waited at home, and she came home with the collar in her hand and and put it on the counter, and it was pretty rough. Certainly not unexpected. I knew it was going to be a difficult process. Just the loss alone and missing him was going to be difficult to deal with for a period of time. But it was every bit as difficult as you would expect it to be when you love somebody or something that much.
It's like a member of the family has left you.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I know you've had dogs too, right?
Yeah, labs, and we've had to put a couple down over their lifespan, and it's not easy.
No.
And it's even tougher for us, Brandon, when you have kids who sleep with the dog and they jump with him, and then all of a sudden he's gone. And then the little kids, they're 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, and they say, "Where is he? Where is he? Or where is she?"
Well,
We've had a couple, and you have to explain, he's in heaven.
and unfortunately, my daughter was old enough to understand what was happening when Tyson passed, but it was like that was particularly poignant for my wife and I because Tyson was there from the beginning, almost from the beginning of our relationship, and he was there when my daughter was born. He was waiting when we brought her home from the hospital the first time. So there's even pictures in the book. There's a whole section on that. And so for us, Tyson was just he was just a pillar. He was always there, and he was like a place marker in our lives. And then all of a sudden, he wasn't there anymore. So yeah, it's people. I'd say people that discount the impact that animals have on our lives and that discount the pain that a dog lover or owner or cat lover or whatever go through when they lose their pets. I'd say that they just haven't experienced it, because it's. I mean, I think people that I've known people that they lose a beloved animal and they go to work that day.
That's right. That's
and
right.
It's like, are you all right? You want to talk about it? And he was old. Like,
yeah.
Seriously, are you being okay with? To me, you're either maybe you didn't open your heart to them, which I think is, with some people that's how they see their pets that way. They don't see them as members of the family quite as much as others. But I think a lot of people, for it's a cultural norm, or they think it's a cultural norm to discount that loss, and they don't allow themselves the time and the space to process it. And I think they're cheating themselves when they do that.
Our producer Tom has a little dog. His name is Freddie, and he's getting up there in age too. And but I mean, it's like an extension of his arm. I mean, where Freddie goes, Tommy goes, and Tom can't wait to get home from work to take care of Freddie. I mean, it's got that close affection.
Yeah, I get it. I understand 100%.
It's truly amazing how a little animal can have such an impact on your life, but you learned that they're much more than just little animals. They are spiritual beings.
Absolutely, and I believe that they're here for their own development, their own process. But I really think that animals are angels, that are here to help us to grow and become richer and better people.
I think so,
I really
too.
do believe that.
After the break, Brandon, we're going to talk about how the spiritual part of Tyson became part of you, and then leading you to write the story, the book, Seeing Animal Communicators, and you can tell us what happened. It's truly remarkable. And other than that, did you ever end up getting another dog?
Yes. We have 2 dogs that we've gotten since Tyson passed, and they're incredible. So I will never be without a dog, I don't think.
That's part of your life. Well, up next, the book Tyson's Gift. We'll talk with Brandon about how the spiritual part of all this started after little Tyson passed on. Next hour, we will take calls with Brandon Wainwright as we talk about his incredible story. And if you want to share your stories, perhaps you've had a supernatural or spiritual event with your loved one, your animal that has passed on as well. And welcome back to Coast. George Noory with you, Brandon Wainwright with us. His book is called Tyson's Gift. So at what point, Brandon, after Tyson passed on, did you begin to feel this supernatural presence?
Well, so I wouldn't have been able to articulate it to you like that, but I would say about probably the first day or two after he passed away, I realized that I wasn't, I was hurting, as you would expect, but
Sure.
but I realized that it wasn't just the loss of him that I was grappling with. It was where is he? Is he okay? Does he still exist? Did he just go into the ethers? And I couldn't. It was hard for me to even fathom the idea that he no longer existed, because he was such a rich, complex soul, and so I found myself I found myself looking for comfort, and so I started reading books about the afterlife, specifically about animals in the afterlife, and I stumbled on a book called Animals and the Afterlife. I actually punched in to Amazon Animals in the Afterlife, and so it spits out this title. It's almost exactly what I punched in. And this book is by Kim Sheridan, and she's a naturopathic doctor who also happens to have a lot of intuitive ability. And it's autobiographical, and it just lays out all these experiences that she had, everything from animal communication to reincarnation, specifically for animals. And it was so compelling to me that I just decided either she is crazy, she's dreaming all this up, she's lying, or this is real, and it's worth exploring. And I was in such a state in terms of my grief and my desire to have answers at that point, that I decided to embark on my own journey and my own search. And so I did, like I talked about, like you were saying, I did sessions with animal communicators, and eventually with a medium as well. And the experiences that I had, initially I was kind of left wanting. Actually, not that these communicators weren't credible, but with the information that was passed to me wasn't anything that made me say, "Oh, this is true." Because like you were saying earlier, I was a skeptic, a very hard-nosed skeptic, actually, and so it was. While I might have wanted to believe that we live on after we pass, I wasn't going to just accept that we did because it made me feel better. I was going to need some serious evidence, and I found that through these sessions that I did, and in the book it details what transpired and the information that was passed and how it impacted me. But basically, it was like the first major chink in my skeptic armor. That, wait a minute, this is real. I can't explain this any other way. As far as the information was so specific that there wasn't anything you could find on the internet. I mean, the amount of research you would have had to have done into my life to find all this stuff there's no way you could do it. So I was like, how else could it be? She must, what is it? Occam's razor. Whatever, if it presents itself, if that's the most practical answer, is probably the correct answer. Well, in this case, that's what it was. So from that point on, then I found myself, well, if this is real, then I should probably delve in even deeper and see where it takes me. And so that's when I discovered, because I wanted to grow in my own intuitive abilities and my own connection to spirit. So I started meditating, and then I got into the energy healing, and so now I've had my own tangible experiences, if you will, with spirit, and I've seen the results of it, and and so I continue to. It's just like this beautiful rabbit hole, and once you get started down it, you can't turn back, because it's such a enlightening reality, if you will, and it brings so much peace. You just keep going.
Do you sometimes wish you had started earlier in your life and career with this?
Well, it came when it was supposed to come.
Right.
I had, like I was saying earlier, I tried religious pursuits. I tried, which I thought were spiritual. I took on what I was able to take on at that time in my development and my experiences in life. And I think there was not a point prior to this when I would have been open enough and ready enough to even go down that road to that exploration. I don't think it would have been possible with where I was at prior to it. Not that I was like, closed off or anything like that. It was just that I guess I had seen enough, and I'd come to a place within my heart through Tyson where I was open enough to be able to at least consider these things and really take them in and process them. So I do wish it would have been nice if all this came earlier, because it has brought me a lot of joy and peace, and it's helped me to spread light and bring this to other people's lives. But we all have our walk, we all have the road that we're on, and we all are serving God, the universe, in our own way, and this was my path. So I think it's more powerful now than it probably would have been if it had come earlier, but it certainly would have been easier. So,
what would you say Tyson has done for you, Brandon, that has enhanced you?
Well, he really, like I said, he opened my heart in a way that I don't think anybody or anything else could have done that the way he did. He was the perfect companion at the perfect time in my life, and he like I said, he brought out the love in me. He brought out the vulnerability in me. He helped me to see that joy and that innocence that I had tucked away into my little back pocket from my youth, and then connecting with him in the afterlife and being shown by him that in no uncertain terms that we live on, that we're eternal, that we're spiritual beings having an earthly human experience, not humans occasionally having a spiritual experience. All this I learned through him, because of him. It's he's this beautiful dog who's my teacher,
Yeah.
and so he does, all this wouldn't have been possible without him. And so the book, the healings that I've done, it's all stems from him. That's why I call the book Tyson's Gift. That's why I call the energy healing practice Tyson's Gift Healing, because it all originates with him.
When was that first moment after he died that you realized there's something going on here?
Well, I would say it was in the third animal communication that I had, where I had come to a place where I the first two didn't do anything for me, and I kind of come to the conclusion that maybe I was deluding myself, and that I was just trying to medicate myself through this idea.
And that's normal and expected to feel that way. Did you feel disillusioned?
I wasn't disillusioned, because I didn't think that the communicators were charlatans or anything, and I didn't think it was necessarily not true, but I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to connect the way that I hoped, or that I was going to have the experiences that were going to connect me to it and convince me. So, but I was still open. In fact, when I had that communication, I told Sandy Casca, that was the name of the communicator. I told her, I've had these experiences, and I got to tell you, I'm skeptical. If anything, these first two left me more skeptical than I was before. And I said, I'm still open, but and I'm not discounting it or anything, but just know that that's kind of where I'm at. And her response was, well, I'm sorry that they didn't convince you, or that you didn't get what you wanted out of them, but I'm going to give you what comes to me, what Tyson gives me, and hopefully that will make a difference to you. And the information that was passed on, I'm not going to get too much into it, because why read the book if you don't? But the information that was passed on was so specific, and it describing relationships and even physical ailments that Tyson had, and And it was like I remember being kind of in this like kind of a daze, like.
But the communicator would not know this at all, would she?
No. And in fact, the communicator was it was over the phone. There was no physical interaction at all. She couldn't see my body language or anything like that. In fact, I was just sitting in my car in a parking lot at the time, talking to her. She's in Iowa. I was in California at the time, and she had no basis of knowledge of me at all. And the thing too that brought credibility to me was she was a practicing attorney who just happened to do this on the side because she had the ability and wanted to help people. So why you wouldn't do that she's obviously not a charlatan. Why would she do that?
Right.
She's an attorney, and she's obviously very intelligent if she's an attorney. So, but it was like this euphoric kind of daze that it put me in, like, oh my God. Like I felt it in my gut.
Like, how would she know that? How would she know that? It must have been just baffling you.
It was more than that, though. It was like I felt on an intuitive level. The one thing that I've learned through this process is that I used to just ignore, as I think a lot of people do, is I felt it on a gut level. I felt it in my bones that it was real. And whereas before it was always like just blocked, in my head, like, no, there's so many explanations for this. In this case, part of it was that the information was so accurate, but it was also, I felt it. Like you said, when was that aha moment? Well, I literally, I felt it intuitively that it was real. And then, so from that point on, I went on and had even more powerful communications that were even more detailed, even more accurate. And so, it got to the point where there was no turning back, because I would have had to lie to myself. Whereas before, when I was trying to, I pursued different, like I said, different religions, a handful of them, and I wanted to be a part of those spiritual communities, and I wanted that that peace that came with what those belief systems were, but I couldn't buy into them. So I felt like I would have been lying to myself to keep going. Well, in this case, with the communication with Tyson, I felt like I would have been lying to myself to deny it. It was the exact opposite of what I had experienced before. So it was like, wow, okay, I need to go down this road. I need to see where this leads. And it just, all it's done is gotten richer and richer. And I've also learned that I know very little. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know all that much.
Right.
But it's been a really wonderful experience. And, I'm hoping other people will be inspired by what I've experienced to maybe go on their own search.
What would you say is the biggest gift that Tyson has given you through this?
I think it's a combination, I would say, between the love. I would say the love that I experienced through him and with him has just made me a better person. It's made me a better husband, a better father, a better friend, a better cop when I was still in law enforcement, because I brought forth my best self, and it was because of what I experienced through him. Aside from that knowledge of eternal life, not the abstract version that you might learn at church, but the knowing, having the experience of having interfaced with it, the peace that comes with that, the level of depth that you realize that your life has, the importance of everybody on this world. Every animal on this world, we all play a role, and we're all eternal, and we're all, we all mean something, and we all deserve respect from each other. I mean, I was always somebody that cared about other people and saw the best in people, and naturally empathetic, but it put it on steroids for me. It really, it made that knowledge much more, the best word I could just, I guess, tangible, and it just
and real.
Me. Yeah, I mean, it was no longer, it wasn't an abstract. It was 100% true, and I knew it. Not just, I knew it intimately.
Are you still in contact with Tyson in a certain way?
Yes, absolutely. I interact with him every day. But yeah, I've had, the thing about all this was the communication opened me up initially, but I've gotten, because I opened spiritually and became more cognizant of my intuitive abilities, psychic abilities, if you will, and just being more aware of that, it's opened me up. For example, the energy healing, that's a spiritual thing. That's
sure.
Something where that comes from spirit. It's not coming from me, it's coming from spirit. So it's tapped me into that realm on a much more conscious basis. And so I've been able to communicate with Tyson on my own, without the help of communicators. And so it's been a pretty amazing walk, I'll tell you that much.
When did you realize you had the healing ability properties?
So the first thing I did was once I got on the road and realized I got to go down this road, I got to see where this leads. The first thing I did was I learned Reiki. I had a friend at work who was another animal lover, another cop too, who had learned Reiki, and I was telling her about what I was experiencing, and she says, you should really learn Reiki. And Reiki, if for people that don't know what that is, it's a Japanese form of energy healing. It's Rei and Ki, so it's universal life force energy. That's the description.
And it works. Hold on for a second, Brandon. We're at the top of the hour. This hour, we'll take your calls with Brandon Wainwright as we talk about his work, Tyson's Gift, on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Noory back with Brandon Wainwright as we're talking about his book, Tyson's Gift, about his little chihuahua, which he was able to communicate with from the other side. Brandon, you're talking about how you took Reiki to help your healing. What else did you do to enhance yourself?
Once I learned Reiki, then I started using Reiki. The first thing I did was my wife was my test subject, and I right away when I worked on her, she had been having trouble sleeping for quite a while, and the first time I worked on her, it was not long before she went to bed, and she went and got in bed afterwards and slept so good she literally didn't move an inch the whole night. After having trouble sleeping for months prior to that.
Right.
So I was like, wow, this is for real. And I started initially, I didn't really feel much, but then I started feeling this energy pulsing through my hands. Everybody experiences it a little bit differently, but for me, I experienced electrical impulses going through my hands. I can literally feel like a bead of electricity going down my hand and through my fingers. And so and then my wife also, she was going through the change, if you will, and she was having hot flashes. So anytime she had a hot flash, I would just reach out my hand. She'd grab my hand and I'd make the hot flash go away with the Reiki. And so it was proving itself to me really quickly. And through all this process, it's an interesting thing because you have these experiences and you learn that it's, that it's for real, but at the same time, that skeptical mind, that left brain mind that we all have, wants to inch its way in and try to convince you that you're deluding yourself, So having these experiences with Reiki, it just kept proving it to me over and over and over again that this was real, that there was more. Reiki is also with energy healing. You can actually send the energy to people. You don't necessarily have to be hands-on. You can, for example, right now, if you wanted me to heal something on you, I could send you Reiki or other forms of energy healing that I've learned since then to you right now. And the concept behind that is, and the reality behind that is that spiritual energy is not governed by geography or time. And so, which makes sense if you think about it. If you're channeling energy and touching somebody with it, if the energy is originating from spirit, why couldn't you also send it to somebody in another physical location? Because initially I was skeptical. How could you? I get that I can put my hands on you and do it, but how does it work that I could send it? But the more I thought about it, if this one works, then logically speaking, this one should work as well.
Right.
And the first thing that happened when I learned how to send was a friend of mine, his daughter had chronic migraines to the point where she had to drop out of school and college, and for years we're talking daily debilitating migraines, and they went away immediately as soon as I started sending this stuff to her. So it was one of these situations where it kept proving itself to me, which made me want to dive deeper. And eventually I became a Reiki master. So what that sounds a lot more grandiose than it actually is. What that means is that I can teach Reiki. And the energy that I've been attuned with is of a higher frequency, higher concentration, if you will. But then from there, I kind of stagnated for a while, continued my meditative practice and all that. And then I started taking classes at a place in northern Georgia called Belfi University. It's a spiritual university up there where they teach energy healing and other spiritual concepts. So at this point I've learned a number of different modalities, and it's been really cool. There's some really awesome energy healing modalities out there that I've found to be very effective. And with that, as you progress along, you start realizing that you have abilities besides, like for me, my strong suit is the energy healing. That's what's always come natural to me. From the time I got the Reiki attunement, the first Reiki attunement, it was very effective, and I could physically, tangibly feel it, which for me was important because it's not just an abstract, like I was saying earlier. It was something that I could actually feel. But with that, so the more you start challenging yourself, you realize that everybody has psychic ability. Everybody does. I don't care who you are. Everybody has it, and to varying degrees. Of course, there are people that are just born with an innate talent for clairvoyance, for example, or clairaudience, or there's multiple different clairs. But I found that I have other clairs besides the clairsentience, besides the ability to give energy healing, to channel that. I've also got other abilities that I wouldn't have never been able to. I've always had them, but I didn't even notice them. And I think that's the case with most people. You ignore, where you think something's just a regular thought, and then when you start paying closer attention, you realize, wait a minute, this didn't come just from me. That just popped into my head out of nowhere. For example, it's learning it's learning to see it, to recognize it, and trust it. Trust that it's coming from a different place besides just your left brain head, and so as I've progressed along, it's just gotten more and more rich, and I've also done a lot more reading, and I've met a lot of different people, and you start to realize that where I used to think that all this was so kooky and I shouldn't say that. I didn't think I thought it was very unique and unusual and rare prior to getting into all this, and then you start to realize that not only does most everybody have a story like this on some level, but there are a lot of people out there, a lot of people out there that do energy healing and do have psychic ability and are aware of it. There's a lot more than people realize, and it's pretty cool. It kind of opened my brain up.
It does. Where do people get your book, Tyson's Gift? Amazon?
Well, if they go to tysonsgift.com, there's a button there you can click to go. It takes you to Amazon. On Amazon, you can get it in paperback, you can get it on audiobook, and you can also get it on ebook. All three of those are available.
Let's take some calls for you. They're lining up here, Brandon. Let's go to Michelle in Virginia to get us started. Hi, Michelle.
Good morning, Mr. Norrie. How are you?
Great. Hope you are too.
Very well. I had an interesting little story. When I was a little girl, I was probably about 5 or 6 years old, and my parents decided we were going to go get some dogs. They were litter mates. They were sisters. One was named Patches. The other was named Goldie. And one day when I was probably about 12 years old or so, we were coming back from a vacation down with some family, and Goldie, the one, somehow managed to get out of the fence, and she got hit, and unfortunately she passed away. Oh. Excuse me, she passed away. And I was having a hard time dealing with her death for a while, and then not only that, just I was going through some personal stuff, 12, 13 years old, and they always slept with me. And one night, I hear something, and so does Patches. And I look out from my bed, and I could almost see every single detail of my dog Goldie. And she's just laying there, and I'm like, oh, okay. And this is about 6 months later, and Patches saw her too. And I ran upstairs and told my parents. I was like, y'all aren't going to believe what happened. And I think that was her just coming back to check on me because, Patches was a little different. She was a little off too because, they were sisters. They'd been together their whole lives. And I just thought that was something real neat. Just something I've never forgotten. This was, we're talking 25 years ago, so. That's
a great story. What do you think of that, Brandon?
Michelle, I totally believe you, and I've known lots of people that have had similar experiences, and I think you can absolutely count on the fact that Goldie came to pay you a visit. And is it a he or a she?
It's a she.
Is she? I'll bet you she was there a lot more than you realized.
Brandon, too, some people report seeing little paw prints in the bed and things like that. Did that ever happen to you and Tyson?
Never paw prints, but there were multiple interactions with Tyson while my wife and I were in bed. Yeah. And I think the thing about that is you get, when you sleep, you get into a real calm state where your brain kind of, it slows down and you're open to things that you aren't normally open to in your daily consciousness. I think that's very, very common that you have interactions with your pets while you're in bed.
Absolutely. Thanks, Michelle, for your story. Really appreciate
it. Thank you, Michelle.
I love it. Joe in Monterey, California is with us. Hey, Joseph.
Thank you for taking my call, George.
You're welcome, Joe.
Okay, so I want to ask your guest if he's ever considered learning how to communicate with the other side, especially animal communicator. Also, I wonder if he knew that Dr. Usui developed Reiki to develop your spirituality. It can be used to develop your spirituality, and also you can heal people. As far as communicating with animals, once I was walking home. I was living with someone, and she had 2 dogs and 2 cats. And one of the dogs would bark anytime anyone came into the alleyway, which the door was in the alleyway. So one time I was coming, and I was talking to the dog telepathically not to bark. I'm coming home, please don't bark, don't bark. And when I got in, the dog did not bark. In fact, the dog didn't bark until like a week or so later, and my friend said, the dog is supposed to be a watchdog, so could you undo what you did? And I did, and the dog, started to bark again. So you can communicate telepathically with animals, and I'm not an animal communicator per se, but people can practice communicating with their pets. Thank you, George, for taking
my
call.
All right, thank you. Did you ever think of mastering this a little bit more, Brandon, and become a communicator yourself?
I have, actually. Yeah, that particular skill set isn't one that comes as natural to me, but I've known quite a number of them. In fact, I'm going to be starting my own podcast with an animal communicator who happens to be
that's cool.
A former cop as well. So yes, absolutely. I've thought about it, and it is something that I think I will eventually explore. Right now I'm more focused on the energy healing, but being that I have such a love for animals and It seems like a natural fit. It would be perfect if I could actually develop that skill in addition to the energy healing, because the two go hand in hand. And by the way, while on that note, animals are actually very receptive to energy healing, is what I've found with them. So, it would, if you can actually communicate with them and give them healing at the same time, and what better combination, right?
What is it about the energy healing that works? Yeah, are you tapping into something out there in the universe? What is it?
Well, it's basically, so the energy is coming from spirit, and there's different forms of energy, light energy, if you will, energy of love and God energy. That comes through. And that's the main difference between the different modalities that I've experienced so far is that the different energies are different that you're channeling. But the practitioner is basically, one of my teachers likes to call himself a pipe, like a plumbing pipe, because that's what he is. He's a conduit. That's what any practitioner is a conduit of the spiritual energy flowing from spirit through the practitioner and into the client or the patient, if you will. And so the way it works is that energy has the ability to interact, with your, a lot of times you're working on your chakras, which do you want me to explain that?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Okay. So chakras are your spiritual energy centers. You have 7 main ones, your root, your sacral, your solar plexus, your heart, your throat, your third eye, which is right between your eyebrows, and your crown. And each of those parts, those chakras, are associated with different organs in your body, in different spiritual centers as well. And so when that energy comes into your body, into the chakras, and it gets them firing on all cylinders, it increases your health. And that's one way that it heals. But I've heard of stories where broken bones were mended. I know people, I actually know them personally, where they healed broken bones, where the bone was broken before the session and then it just wasn't broken anymore.
That's amazing.
They also, cancer, before the session they had cancer. When the session was over, they just, all of a sudden the cancer was gone next time they went for a test. It's not something that and to be completely honest, I can't explain exactly how it works. All I know is that the practitioner, as the conduit of the spiritual energy, that's what they're doing. They're being as open of a conduit as possible, so the energy flows to the client. And what that entails is it's all about intention. It's all about being in a where you're focused on the love that you have for this person. It doesn't necessarily have to be personal. It's just that I love this person as a fellow human, and I'm going to be open and channel this energy the best I can to help them as much as I can. And then spirit takes over the rest. And I've healed. I had a person just recently that had a real bad Crohn's flare up, and when we were done, it was gone. It was a half-hour session. When we were done, it was gone.
Does it surprise you sometimes too, Brandon, that it really works?
Absolutely. Every time it happens, it's such a beautiful affirmation.
It's a miracle, isn't it?
It is, because it doesn't always work. It's one of those things where spiritual energy.
Does the recipient have to believe it's going to work?
No. The recipient doesn't have to believe, but they have to want to heal. Their intention needs to be to heal. So I know that sounds counterintuitive, because if you have a healing session, of course you want to heal, right? But we all have different issues going on within us, and maybe you're somebody that you've got self-esteem issues or self-worth issues where you don't believe that you deserve it, and that's going to create an energy block where the energy is not going to be able to flow through you as well. So maybe initially the work that needs to be done is to clear that block, is to change your perspective. There's other people that maybe you have a physical ailment that, while it's painful and you wish it would go away, it's actually serving some other purpose where, it's keeping you from being able to pursue some challenge that you really need to be pursuing. So you're actually attached to that injury because you're afraid to pursue that challenge. So do you really want to heal from it? And if you have that kind of resistance, it's gonna make it more difficult for that energy to heal you.
Absolutely. Brandon, give out your website. We've got it linked up, but I'd like people to hear it from you.
It's www.tysonsgift.com, so TYSONSGIFT.com. And then the sister website for my healing practice is TysonsGiftHealing.com.
Super. We're going to come back and take final calls with you in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. On our next Coast to Coast program, Mark Seifert joins us to talk about the genius of Nikola Tesla. And then later on, Samantha Fay joins us to talk about dreams and dream interpretations. So I'm looking forward to that. And welcome back to Coast, our final segment. Brandon Wainwright with us, his book, Tyson's Gift. Let's go to the phones. Michael in Boulder, Colorado, first-time caller. Hi, Michael.
Good evening, fellas. I'm so happy I finally landed on Coast to Coast.
Yes, you have. Good to have you with us.
Hey, I am a blind person, but that's not why I'm calling. I'm a guide dog user, Brandon, and talk about getting close to your animal and being able to read their minds, and sometimes they think more about what I'm doing before I know what I'm doing. How does that sound?
That absolutely. I imagine, you're probably a lot more in tune to your dog than a lot of people are. But
I bet.
They definitely, they do connect with us on an intuitive level. And, I think when you develop a bond with a dog like that, that love that you share and that understanding is something that's, it's deeper than what you have with a lot of humans. So I definitely think that's pretty awesome.
That love is important, Brandon, isn't it?
Oh, it's everything. I think the love, that what I was talking about with the way Tyson opened my heart and opened my ability to, or brought back my more conscious ability to love. It ends up, it starts with the dog, but then it ends up opening up to everything else in your life. Your other dogs, perhaps your friendships, your family relationships, your coworkers. It's dogs. That love that dogs bring to the world has a really it has a wide reach. It has a big impact that spreads a lot farther than people realize. And I think we should value our animals a lot more and be more conscious of that.
Let's go west of the Rockies. Margaret's with us in Ukiah, California. Hello, Margaret.
Hi, George. Thanks for taking my call.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
I had a couple of real quick anecdotal experiences.
All right.
The first one was I had put my cat to sleep, and a couple months later, I was in my living room. I was kind of grieving him still, and out of the corner of my eye, I watched him. Now, this is in broad daylight, and I've never seen a ghost before. I watched him walk towards through the living room and towards my bedroom. I froze. I mean, it was like, and then he passed out of sight. And so there was that. And he was a feral cat that I had rescued. He was really, really sick, and I just kind of nursed him, and we've developed a very strong bond. But that just floored me. And the second one is I had a wolf, and I thought, I would like to try astral projection. And I thought, okay. And I started to do, I visualized myself floating up out of my body and walking around the bedroom to the kitchen. And I thought, how am I going to be able to prove to myself that I actually did this, that I don't just have a really great imagination? And I thought, oh, I know, Otto's outside. I'll go and touch him. And so I visualized myself going out into the yard. And now Otto has never, as a wolf, barked in his entire life. But when I reached down to touch him, he let this humongous woof out that like he'd been surprised and was shocked that somebody had touched him because he didn't sense anybody there. And I had to go out and calm him down after that. And those are my 2 stories. Thank you for taking my call.
Oh, thank you. Great stories, too. So many people have had these experiences, Brandon.
Yeah. That's I had a handful of those types of experiences prior to Tyson, but we're a lot of people are so quick to dismiss them. It doesn't sound like Margaret was one of those people, but I think the majority of us, it happens, and then maybe you tell your closest friend about it, but you otherwise just kind of keep it to yourself and don't think about it much. But if you stop and ponder these things, it's the significance of them on an existential level is pretty huge, and I think a lot of people could that would be a good thing for people to ponder, bring a lot of peace ultimately.
Let's go to Maria in Illinois. Hello, Maria.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call. I had a couple of questions. So I was wondering, do you ever, are you able to ever kind of communicate or sense anything from a dog while they're still alive? I have an 18-year-old rat terrier. His name is Jethro. He's the love of my life.
That's amazing.
I mean, I consider him my soulmate, and I would take a bullet for my dog. I mean, I would never ever want to lose him, but he is 18 years old, and it's like, I don't know. He can walk, but it's like he's lost a lot of muscle in his hind legs, and he is old. I don't know how to communicate to him, spiritually.
But you feel connected to him, don't you, Maria?
He's the love of my life. I would take a bullet for him. I talk baby talk to him all the time. I sing to him. I'm always hugging and cuddling with them. But it makes me so sad to think that he could go, and because he's 18, and I don't want to lose him no matter what. I wish that somehow he could supernaturally live a really supernaturally long life with me.
Brandon, give her some advice on grief on something like that.
Well, first off, I can empathize with what you said about taking a bullet. In fact, there's a chapter in the book called "I'd Take a Bullet for You, Little Buddy," because I can totally share that sentiment. He's lived 18 years, so he's had a really, really great life. Obviously, to be with somebody that loves him as much as you do, he must have had a pretty amazing life. But I think where you're concerned about where he's at. Consider consulting with an animal communicator, because they can communicate with them while they're still alive, as well as after they've crossed over, because they are communicating with them spiritually, telepathically. And I think not only will it give you some peace in terms of where he's at, and is he ready to cross over? Does he want to stay? Why is he staying? There's all kinds of information that you can get from an animal communicator, but it'll also establish that connection with you, where that there's because what you get from that communication is evidence. You get proof. You get a lot of peace that comes with that. That he is an eternal spirit, and so when he does cross over, unfortunately, we all have our checkout time, but it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's a matter of perspective. When you realize that they are eternal, and that they may not be in their physical body anymore, but they are still very much alive, every bit as alive as they were when they were in their body. It brings a lot of peace. Not to say that you're not going to still miss him and grieve him, because of course you will. There's a huge loss there, and you should be very tender with yourself through that process. But knowing that they still live does bring a lot of comfort, and so I would recommend that you do that.
All right, Maria, we got a lot of calls, so I can't take your second question, but thank you. First-time caller, James in Spokane, Washington. Welcome to the program. Hi, James.
Yes, my son and I just lost our. We're both disabled veterans.
Thank you for serving.
We both lost our emotional support dogs. They were killed in a kennel.
Oh,
by
God.
a pit bull. And we're devastated.
Oh, my God.
Right now.
How do you overcome that kind of grief, Brandon? I mean, 2 dogs killed by a pit bull.
Yes.
James, I'm so sorry. I don't. I'm not even gonna try to say that I understand what that feels like, because all I know is that what you're feeling is all I can say is that they are still with you, and that there is a way for you to contact them. I would highly suggest that you consult with an animal communicator, or if you email me, you can email me through the website. I can recommend some for you, but it's easy for me to say this because I'm not in that position, but I would try to focus as much as possible not on how they died, but the fact that they still live on. Like I said, I know that's easy for me to say, but the reality is that they are still with you, that they are just fine, and I would really hope that you would consider doing a communication session, because you'll be able to find that out for yourself, and it'll bring you some comfort.
Oh, that's good. Thank you, James, and condolences. Connie in Daytona Beach, Florida. Hi, Connie. Connie, you there? Nope. Let's go to Kathleen in Alberta, Canada. Hi, Kathleen.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call. And
Thank you.
I feel bad about the guy before. How do you follow that?
Oh, my gosh. I know.
I had a dog that I gave to my dad on Father's Day, and I had it for 12 years, and she got some infections in her elbows because she was always laying on him, and the the vet gave her a shot which shut her kidneys down, and I had to put her down, and I just still think that I haven't done the right thing, but I know I did, because I did it what was right for the dog and not for me. Do they ever come back? Because I have another rescue dog that I got about 6 years later. She's not like the Thai dog that I had to put down. But I just wonder, do they ever come back in another animal? Because I've had a lot of animals in my life.
Like reincarnation.
I've never had a dog like Thai.
Yes, absolutely they do. I'm not going to go into too much detail on it, but I have experienced that myself. So, there's lots of accounts that I've read about, but I have firsthand experienced it. So yes, they absolutely do. And the thing is, if you have a beloved dog or cat or whatever the pet that you love so much, if you have a desire for them to reincarnate, I've made contact with dogs from my childhood, and ask them, let them know that you really would like them to come back to you.
Do they search you out, Brandon, or do we find them?
In terms of, like, if they were to come back, would you have to go looking for them?
Right. How do you find them?
They orchestrate it. They make it happen.
It's the puppy that comes running up to you or something like that, isn't it?
Yeah, I've heard stories of where somebody opens their front door and there's a strange dog sitting on the porch, and I've a lot of times, they might come through a rescue, or you just happen to, somebody contacts you about this dog, and you go and check them out, and you find, oh my gosh, I know this dog. Everything's connected, and there's a plan for everybody, and if they want to come back to you, they'll make it happen. That much I can promise you. So So yes, if that is something that you desire, I say reach out to them and let them know that you want them to come back.
If people want to email you, they can do so through your website?
Yes. Yeah.
And if they want a session on the healing, they can do that as well through the TysonGiftHealing.com? Yeah.
Yeah. There's links on both sites to the other site, but yeah. And if you email me, I will definitely, it might take me a bit, but I will definitely respond.
Super. Thanks a lot, Brandon. And again, thank you for serving. Okay.
Hey, George, it was an honor. My wife wanted me to tell you that she's a Coast Insider, has been for a long time. We've both been fans for a long time. So this really was an honor and a pleasure. I really appreciate you having me on.
Thank you, my friend. Get some sleep, but you did a great job for us. For Adam